Hello and welcome to today's webinar by Congree Language Technologies in cooperation with our partners SDL and Content Rules. My name is Michael Mannhardt. I drive the international business activities at Congree and I'm happy to be the host and moderator of today's webinar. Our title today is A Day in the Life of Winona Writer and Bob O Skoole. Subtitle, How Intelligent Authoring Assistance Makes You Much Smarter in Global Content Teams. If you wonder who these people are, they're both content creators. Both are doing a great job in writing content, but their way of working is a bit, let's say, different from each other, and how technology contributes to that and how possibly you within your organization as well can benefit from technology to support your content creation process. That is something we will hear during the webinar. At the beginning, just some housekeeping information. All attendees are muted during the webinar, but you are very welcome to ask questions by using the questions window in GoToMeeting. We will collect the questions and are going to have a question and answer session at the end of the webinar. So before we start, just a few words about our company, Congree Language Technologies. Congree had been founded 10 years ago in 2010, but the actual usage of our technology goes a bit back in our history. We have a background from a science research institute in Germany, and already 30 years ago, the first development of our core technology had been made to provide a software platform that supports writers and companies to write better content and to optimize content. We had a quite nice growth over the years in the German-speaking countries. Since 2019, we also started some additional international activities, in particular towards the US market. And today, we have around 200 enterprise customers with very well-known names. For instance, all of the German premium car manufacturers like Daimler, BMW, and Volkswagen are our customers, but also a lot of other companies from very different verticals. So basically what we do at Congree is all around author assistance, both with technology and also with a lot of services by us and our partners. Our software product with the name Congree Authoring Server is based on computational linguistics, and our technology is supported by what we call a linguistic intelligence that allows to provide feedback about content quality right in the environment where you write content. So for instance, within Tridion Docs. To provide for the beginning a very brief overview on our product, there are three main core components in Congree. One component is language check, which checks for style and grammar, and many companies already have something like a style guide. We bring company style guides into what we call a linguistic rule set to make sure the style guide will actively be used within the content creation process. The second component is terminology, and this component checks for your company specific terminology, your branding, the right usage of product names, and so on. Yes, and then the third component is authoring memory, also known as reuse, and this is very powerful. This allows to provide already existing content for reuse on a sentence basis, which helps a lot to achieve consistency and also to reduce, for instance, translation costs. All that works in real time, which means the authors write content and will instantly receive feedback within their environment, like for instance, within the editors of SDL Tridion Docs. And by saying that, I'd like to introduce our today's speakers. Well, Swisher, CEO of Content Rules, Chip Gettinger, VP Global Solutions Consulting at SDL, and from Congree, we have Philipp Baur, Product Manager for the Congree Authoring Server. So why don't we make a short introduction? So Philipp, would you like to start maybe?
Yes, hi, I'm Philipp. I'm the Product Manager at Congree. And yeah, I will take over the part of Congree for the story for today. And my main job at Congree is designing the software, deciding how it looks like, what functions it's going to have, and interact with our customers to get their feature requests online. So, well, what about you?
Yes, good morning. My name is Val Swisher, and I am the CEO of Content Rules. And we happen to be partners with both Congree and SDL, so I'm very happy to be in the middle of both Philipp and Chip today on your screen. And we are a service provider for Congree. We help with North American deployments. And of course, we do all kinds of fun projects with SDL around Tridion Docs.
Thank you, Val. Thank you, Philip. And I want to thank our new partner, Congree, for hosting this webinar today, and Val, for you joining us. This is Chip Gettinger with SDL. I manage the global solutions team here for our Tridion Docs product, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. And my team works with our customers and partners on adoption of component content management. In fact, it's a good starting point for me to jump in on the next slide and really start to talk about intelligent solutions for modern technical documentation. Really, the challenge many of you have is customers don't have access to precise and personalized information on the various channels that are in use within your company. We all see that fragmentation daily, especially with global companies. And really, the expectation of our customers today is to have a component topic-based delivery that truly is personalized and searchable and interactive. That's really key. So SDL has a product called Tridion Docs, which I'll talk about in a bit, which really provides structured authoring and structured content benefits. And some of the benefits we have seen our customers in the adoption is increase customer satisfaction on their customers. So they're folks that come and see and use their content on their websites, for example, typically in help systems, knowledge articles, and so forth. SDL also really helps unify collaboration for authoring and review cycles, and again, centralizes component content management's approach. We also see a high degree of automation that is provided when you look at this adoption. Again, many of you have perhaps agile kind of processing development, translation integrations, and so forth. So SDL has a very global focus. We understand customers globally and how to improve better content quality through our partnership with Congree and Content Rules. Okay, so on the next slide, let's get our story set up here. So Michael's already mentioned that we're going to be talking about Winona Writer and Bob O Skoole today. So Bob, he works at a tech company, or a tech writer at a company called Company Inc. And Bob does not use a CCMS. He's not using Tridion Docs. And Bob's the kind of writer who really starts at page 1 and writes until his document is complete. And we call him a serious serial writer. Now, to contrast him, Winona is also working at the same company as a tech writer. She does use the Tridion Docs CCMS to manage and author her content. She is working with her content using small, nimble, reusable topics. We see her as a very efficient writer. So Philip, please take it away and tell us the rest of the story. Whoops, there's one more slide for me, which is around adopting a component-based approach. So really, when we look at authoring of modular content, we have the ability to store and manage these components centrally and share them much more easily across the teams that can be collaborating together. And Tridion Docs provides this infrastructure to make content more accessible to your departments and to store them centrally, and finally, to assemble them in a late binding mode to the exact format required by your customers. Many of you may be struggling with multiple formats of traditional PDFs all the way to HTML, maybe to JSON and other kind of advanced formats. Tridion Docs can support them all by single sourcing and providing a unified collaboration, and finally, dynamic delivery of the content. Okay, Philip, now it's your turn to hand it over and tell us our story today.
So let's see what else Bob is up to. So of course, Bob doesn't make any errors. So he knows the entire style guide by heart. In fact, he even participated in its creation. Bob is a real pro. If he violates the style guide, it's on purpose and for good reasons. And sometimes he can be seen secretly browsing through some printed up pages that look suspiciously like a style guide. I don't know exactly what's going on there. Winona, on the other hand, is also a very good writer. She studied the style guide before she started at the company. I mean, this is, of course, very important if you are a technical writer to also read the style guide and know as much of the style guide as you can. But when she's creating, she wants to focus on the content and basically solely on the content. So she appreciates all the help she can get to remember all the rules which are on the style guide. And this is where Congree comes into play. So what Congree actually does is Congree is a electronic form of your style guide. So you have this browser interface which you get as an administrator, where you see all the rules which apply to your company, where you can configure those rules so you can enable certain rules that you want to fire when documentation is created. You can disable rules you don't want to fire when content is created. And you do all that in this browser interface. So here you find your entire rule set, as it also exists in your written style guide, but in electronic form. And this is, of course, not only for style rules, but you also have rules for abbreviations, so how to use or not use abbreviations, how to use grammar correctly, so what grammar rules you want to apply additionally. And of course, very important also, your set of spelling rules, so to be going to British English or US English and so on and so forth. And within the style guide, you also have options to feed your user lexicon, so to ensure that certain expressions or certain words are written in a way which is useful for your company. And you also have a possibility to completely individualize how Congree reacts on violations of those rules. So what wording is used. So we can use exactly the wording you have in your style guide when a violation to any rule of your style guide appears. You will get a notification exactly tailored according to your style guide, which will be fired for the users. And when you're done with the configuration, you put it all together and activate and make your style guide public. And once your style guide is public, what will happen is, as soon as you check out some document from or some topic from SDL Tridion Docs, you will be able to work on that topic. And as soon as you touch this topic, modify some text, click some text, or write some new text, Congree will react to that input, to everything you write and everything you touch, and will tell you if what you have written or what you're looking at is following your style guide as configured before. And this is, of course, very helpful because you don't have to do this manually. So while you write in real time, you get the feedback if you are violating your style guide or not. And we see this here on the left in the editing environment. We see that we have a indicator about the overall quality at the top. So you get the information how safe it is to check in this topic at the current state. Of course, in this state, this topic is very erroneous. There are a lot of issues inside. So we have currently an unsafe state with 77 points out of 100. So it's not completely terrible, but it's still far away from being safe. We can see how many notifications still have to be treated. So how much did Congree find in this topic? We can see how many spelling, style, abbreviation, grammar, and terminology issues are still to be handled. And then we get a list of sheets which treat different problems. And yeah, on the screen, we selected one of those problems. We can see a style problem that we are using passive voice at a location where we should not use passive voice according to the style guide. So this location is highlighted in the topic, so you can see where it is, and Congree tells you why you shouldn't use passive voice here and what is the problem with passive voice. And this is what I mentioned before. The text you see here, this is some default text Congree delivers, but it can be completely replaced by the text within your style guide to completely tailor this to your needs. Yeah, and of course, this is not the only issue, so there are a lot of issues, and what I would do here is to go one by one, do the corrections. As soon as I correct something, this sheet disappears, and yeah, my overall quality goes up. until the system tells me that this document is safe to check in. Yeah, so that's how we make sure that the style guide comes directly to the author while content is being created. Okay, so let's come back to Bob. Bob also knows what the products are called, so he has been documenting them forever. So, and if the hotshots at marketing use different terms, they are wrong and should adapt. So that's Bob's opinion, because after all, Bob has been here much longer than they have. Sometimes, however, Bob forgets stuff. He's a professional, and of course he can admit that. So when he forgets, he calls his good pals at R&D or at production who can normally help him out. And what is 10, 15 minutes a day having phone calls? That's nothing. It's not a problem at all. Winona, on the other hand, also knows a lot about terminology. And luckily she has had access to company's terminology database from the start, which is also very important. It's equally important to having access to the style guide. So of course you need to know what is inside of my terminology database, what can I use, what can I not use, how do we write, how do we communicate with our customers. But Winona also knows that terminology is a living thing and subject to constant change depending on legal developments, product changes, and marketing concepts. So you never have a final terminology. There are always changes you have to do, changes you want to do. And yeah, it can be hard to stay up to date. And this is why Winona takes all the help she can get to stay up to date. And here, of course, I wouldn't tell you that if we wouldn't have a solution. Once again, Congree can help. Once again, we see a checked out topic from Tridion Docs, and we see the style guide on the left side again. What I briefly mentioned before, but I will focus more on right now, is that within the style guide, we also incorporated terminology feedback. So we can directly connect to the terminology database, for example, SDL multi-term, which is the case here in this company. And whenever a terminology violation occurs in the document, the Congree language check panel, our electronic style guide, automatically reacts to it and shows it as just another message, just another notification with all the other style guide violations you have. Because we consider violations in terminology equally important and basically a part of the style guide. So if you want to follow the rules of the company, you also have to follow the terminology rules. And this is like they are completely incorporated here. And whenever a terminology issue appears, just like any other error, it is shown here and the author gets some information what he should do next. Yeah, and additionally to this information we have here, we get an optional additional panel which can be enabled, which is the terminology research panel we can see here to the right, which accesses multi-term directly and shows all information stored together with that term. So if we have a term violation, we get the information, what definition exists for this term, what notes are available, what information on term level. So whatever you have available in multi-term, it will be displayed here and the user has direct access to it. This can be very useful because you don't have to look up terminology manually. The system always hints there's something wrong and looks up the term for you in the background. And whenever this is required, you can have a closer look what the terminology database says about this. This is especially interesting in this case I selected here, because here improvement can be used in some contexts, but in other contexts is wrong. And since Congree doesn't know the context you're writing about, it's good to have the terminology system which tells you in what context you're allowed to use improvement and what context you should use upgrade instead. So once again, and this is a great way to ensure that you always stay up to date regarding your terminology without having to check something manually. You're just fed the information and can use it as you please. So back to Bob. Bob is, of course, also a very creative guy. So he often sneaks in some witty metaphors to lighten the mood. And when he has to document the same steps over and over again, he mixes it up a little bit, so to not get bored and not to bore the reader. And sometimes Bob is in a hurry though, and when he is, he looks up old documents he wrote in the past and copies text from there, because Bob knows that sometimes efficiency is key. Winona is also very creative. That's why she became a writer in the first place. But Winona also knows that her creativity is best spent in developing content never described before. So when the content hasn't been written before, it's perfect to be creative and to create something. And for content already written in the past, she understands that Compathy prefers to save time and money at content creation and at translation instead of the same idea described again and again over and over. And her credo for technical documentation is that consistency is key. So if we have some idea and we expressed this at one point, we should always express this idea using the same word, because this is easier to understand for our users. There are less mistakes, and for the company, it's easier to translate and more cost efficient. And here, of course, Congree can also be helpful. And yeah, Congree does that with another panel, which you can enable. And now we go a little bit downstairs. We see at the bottom of this topic, checked out with Tridion Docs, that for every sentence we write or we click, we get the feedback from the system if the sentence is already known or not, or if there are similar sentences within our system. So this is very useful. So you can, for example, enter some keywords, because you know you're writing about that. So you could write congratulations and purchase. And then you would instantly get all sentences which relate to that topic. So to the topic of congratulating someone and on the purchase. And then you get those sentences and you get similar sentences containing similar words, always sorted by relevancy. So the most relevant sentences first. And then you can just click those sentences in the UI and apply them directly into your topic without having to writing them yourself. And this, of course, also works for already created content. So you can go inside and see if similar content would have already existed in the sentence database. And then you can reuse this content and can be sure that this content has already been used in the past, is linguistically correct, follows the style guide, and has already been translated in the past. So it's always a good idea to reuse the content which is already there, describing the ideas you wanted to describe. And of course, it's a great help to just find sentences you know that existed in the past, or maybe even in the same document. And yeah, an important question related to this is, where is the content coming from? So how do those sentences get inside? And here, Congree also offers different possibilities. One very classic method, which you can always use, is to use your translation memory as a basis. So you import your translation memory and make it available for Congree. Congree taps into your translation memory, and whenever you write content, it tries to find similar content and proposes it to you. But you can also use a set of key documents, special documents, which you think are a very good basis of how you would like to write and how you would like to address your customers. And then you can just tell Congree, take those documents and use them as a basis, and then Congree will read all the sentences out of those documents and have them available for later use as soon as new content is being created. Yeah, and the third method is that you just collect new sentences while content is created. And here, Congree offers an integrated possibility which does that for you. So when you create a new topic, Congree checks every sentence and asks, does the sentence already exist in our database or does it not exist? And if it does not exist, it gives you a possibility to store this sentence centrally. And what we can see here on the screen is that Congree does that even for sentences that contain errors. So we have safety informations, for example, which is, of course, completely wrong. And here Congree also has a possibility to integrate the style guide into this feature. So that we first check the style guide and see what is allowed to be stored in our sentence database. What quality does a sentence have to reach so that it can be stored in our sentence database? And if you enable this gatekeeper, sentences like safety informations where just so much is wrong cannot be stored in your sentence database. And this way you can make sure that you only have high quality sentences in your sentence database for later reuse. And of course, you can also restrict who can participate and who can apply new sentences. So this is also something you can do. But basically, Congree collects all sentences automatically, and you always have the chance as an author, if you have the necessary rights, to store those sentences and have them available for later use. So also a very important feature for content creation efficiency. Yeah. So what else is up with Bob? Bob has done just fine in his career so far. So no customer has complained to him directly about the quality of his documentation. That's great. And Bob does not need anyone to evaluate the work he has been doing. Why improve if you're already the best? And Winona looks at this a little bit differently. So Winona understands that quality control is important and that reporting at Compathy is completely anonymous and only serves the purpose of ensuring overall high quality content for the customer. Also very important here to add that the content created with Congree is checked and there's a reporting done, but this reporting is company specific. So it doesn't go outside of your company. It doesn't go to Congree, and Congree doesn't handle this content. So all the information, all the reporting information you have, they are only within your company. And yeah, this quality system, which ensures that you always write on a high quality, this is coincidentally in perfect alignment with her personal goal to be a professional writer. Yeah, and this is why Congree has this reporting possibility. So what Congree collects is every notification found by the system in any topic being changed. So we can see how many abbreviation errors have been made over time, over a specific time period, which you can select. I think this is the latest quarter, for example. How many grammar, spelling, style, and terminology issues have been found. And yeah, our reporting collects that so that you get an overview where the biggest problems lie. And of course, this does not only go via categories, it really goes down to rules. So you can modify this reporting and tell the system, give me a report for all passive voice violations. And you will see how often your authors have used passive voice incorrectly. And yeah, you can see this in this notification graph. But what you can also see here is how often authors did not react on those notifications. So Congree gave out a notification, but nothing happened afterwards, which is an indicator that the electronic style guide is not used well enough or not serious enough. And this gives you the possibility to talk to your authors and ensure that this can be improved. You also get the information how many notifications have been ignored by your authors. This is different to disregarded. Ignored means that the author on purpose chose to not work on those issues. So there's a button in Congree which allows you to disagree with certain notifications. So you know the author really looked at that, but knows better than the system. And this is why he disagreed. And this is also collected so that you get an overview what rules actually work well and what rules do not work well. And then you can work on that, maybe deactivate the rule, maybe modify them a little bit, and take those decisions. And this accumulates in the success rate, which shows you the success rate for each and every rule you have and for each and every category. So this can be very useful to modify and improve the style guide over time. And also you get an overview of what release levels, so what quality indicator you reach in different check scenarios you have within your company and different writing scenarios. So here I have a simple example two German ones and an English one, and you can see what the quality output at the end of those documents is. So we see that for this one German project, it's okay. For the English one, it's not so good, and yeah, for the other German one, it's in the middle. So as you get an indicator what your overall document quality is, yeah, for all the topics that have been created. Yeah, and this is how Congree can support you in technical documentation or when writing in general. So you have, as Michael mentioned at the beginning, you have the electronic style guide, you have access to terminology, and you have access to similar sentences you can reuse, and you have this powerful reporting functionality to really know what's going on in your company quality-wise. Yeah, and let's get back one more time to our two actors here. Let's go into the future, into a few years later. Bob retires and takes all this knowledge with him. So great for you, Bob. I'm happy for you. Have a good time. You deserve a break. And Winona will miss Bob because he was a really nice guy and a very dedicated technical writer, but she will miss the data that retires with him even more. Since yeah, he was a professional, he knows a lot about the company and he takes that all with him. However, thanks to the electronic style guide, the terminology database, and her access to a vast and complete set of topics and sentences, she will do just fine. And who knows? It looks like she might be promoted anytime soon. So that's our story. That's yeah, to show you how Tridion Docs and Congree can help you to increase your content quality. We are now available for you for any questions you might have. And as you've seen, this is a very general overview of our product and our products. So if you want to know more, feel free to contact us, and then we can go into more detail in a specific demo we can do for you. All right.
Okay. Thank you, Chip, Philip, for this very interesting information we received in this webinar. I think this was a great input to all of us. And as Philip just mentioned, we are now coming to the questions and answers part. So if you have questions, please feel free to submit through the questions window in GoToMeeting. And I have a first question, which goes to Swisher. Well, how would you describe how companies typically start with a software platform like Congree? Maybe they already have a style guide in place. Maybe they already collected some terminology. What are the typical steps if a customer starts with Congree?
Oh, well, that's a good question. So for sure, we suggest that customers gather up their style guide or style guides, because often customers have more than one. And it's always a good idea for the customer to look through the style guide and make sure that it accurately represents all of those grammar and style rules that they do want their writers to follow. Sometimes style guides get out of date, or things change, or companies purchased, or whatever. So, you know, as the customer, you want to make sure you take those style guides, you look through them, make sure that they're accurate, and then you would give them to content rules. And we would go through and also analyze those style guides and compare them to all of the various rules that Congree offers, so that we make sure we get the best match in terms of the configuration of the software and what your style guide says. The next thing that we recommend is that you look for terminology. Now, oftentimes customers will tell us we don't have terminology, but that's really not usually the case. We recommend that if you don't have any terminology that you know of, you certainly start with your product names, any trademarks, service marks, any words that you might have made up that are specific to your company. We make up words all the time. We also want you to be thinking about not just the words that you're going to let people use that are approved, as we would say, but also those terms that you don't want people to use. So that's important to be thinking about. And any words that you have that are used in a different way than we usually think of. So for example, we were working with a financial company, and they had a very different use of the term default than a software company, right? A default setting versus someone defaulting on a loan. So think about that. Where are there the words that you might have your specific use of? And once you have those things, I think also looking at the content that you know will be part of your authoring memory. So you know that there are certain phrases or sentences that are really used over and over again. So for example, if you're a training development company, you might use the phrase, upon completion of this module, comma, you will be able to, colon, and there are dozens of ways to say that phrase. So you might start to think about which pieces of content might help you build that authoring memory so that it's really robust when your writers start using the platform. So those are 3 things you can be focusing on.
Okay, great answer. Thank you. Well, I think there also is a question which relates a little bit to that, and that is we have the question, we have terminology already for our translation process. How can we connect this as a source to Tridion Docs and Congree?
Yeah, I can answer. So if you already have terminology, the first question, of course, we have to ask is where's this terminology located? So where do you have it? As I mentioned in my part already, if you are using SDL multi-term for your terminology, Congree can connect to it out of the box. So it's just an integrated part of Congree that we have this connector which communicates with SDL multi-term. We do the same for some other terminology systems, but basically it doesn't really matter where your terminology exists. There's always a way how you can feed Congree with it. So it can even be an Excel list. It can be any format you can imagine. So for Congree, it's just important that we have the term information somewhere, and then Congree has processes, has possibilities, sync up possibilities to get that terminology information into our system and then use it when content is being checked.
And Val, to add to that, what benefits do you see for technical writers? So, typically terminology has been managed by the translation teams. Val, what benefits do you see for technical writers to be able to align with the terminology in use by translation?
Oh, well, I have a whole soapbox about this. Yes. I think that it's, right? I have an opinion, amazing. I think that it's really critical that the content developers and the folks in localization and translation really align very closely. And there are lots of reasons. First and foremost, we always want to be using terms and also sentences that have already been translated, right? As long as they're correct, right? We don't want to use things that are incorrect, but as long as they're correct, we want to make sure that we are very tightly aligned. And that's going to be important for many reasons. It's going to be less expensive to translate your content It's going to be faster to translate your content. It's going to mean that your content, whether it's in your source language or your translations, that the content itself is more consistent, easier to read. Particularly in technical writing, we want to set an expectation for the reader of how they can expect the information to flow. So a tight integration between the terminology that's translated and the sentences and what we use is so critical. And as I said, Congree is the only tool on the market that I know of that can take that information that is already existing, right? It's already been translated, it exists, and propagate the source back to the writer. And that's a round trip that is going to save time and money, and it's going to be better, it's going to be cheaper, it's going to be faster, it's going to really help your quality as well.
And Val, that's super exciting. And I would add, it would also improve consistency for search of customers on websites and so forth. So there's so many benefits to align. And from SDL's perspective, our new partnership with Congree is very exciting for the reason you mentioned, Val and Philip, regarding the integration with multi-term and the ability to see that terminology automatically in Congree. And Philip had showed Oxygen Author in the examples during the presentation. We also support XMetal. The exciting thing also is around the phrase management, as you mentioned. So it's a very strong partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, Val. Thank you, Chip. There is another question. We have both B2B and B2C content. How can we handle that in Congree? And I think this question, both business to business and business to consumer content, relates a bit to another question we have, which is, can we use different style guides at the same time? And I think there is both an aspect concerning content strategy to that, and then also the let's say, practical technical handling of that. So, well, would you like to start with the content strategy aspect of that between B2B and B2C content?
Well, sure. So, it's very interesting from a strategy point of view. If you are planning on managing content that is different for a B2B and B2C audience, certainly Congree will let you do that. Certainly, you can have multiple rule sets and use the appropriate one for your content. I think that from more of a strategy single source standpoint, we want to be really careful in terms of versioning the same content for different audiences. While there's certainly times where there are things that you would say to a B2C audience that you might present differently to a B2B audience, from a strategy point of view, you're going to have to manage all of those different versions. So I would be very specific and make sure that you really think it through if you want to have multiple versions. As you can probably tell, I am personally not a big fan of versioning the same content. If it's different content, then sure, absolutely, that that can be done and that makes sense. But be really careful with how many versions you decide to create of the same content, because you're going to have to manage that content. You're going to have to update that content. You're going to have to track that content. So will the tools let you? Absolutely. Tridion will let you, Congree will let you, all the different tools will let you. The question is it a good idea?
Okay, thanks, Val. I mean, this was the content strategy aspect. I think the technological aspect is quite easy. Philip, if you like to say something about that.
That's basically as Val already mentioned. So you always have the possibility with Congree to create as many versions of a style guide as you want. using the electronic style guide we saw in the browser interface. So you would connect to this browser interface and just create a new style guide and do the modifications necessary for your target, basically. And of course, you can do the same for terminology. You can have a different subset of terminology for different target audiences, and the same for sentences. So also here you can have different subsets which apply for a certain type of text or for a certain target audience, be it another business or be it the end the end consumer. So, and there's no limitation to how many you can actually do. So you can have, if you want, you can have hundreds of different style guides that differ only marginally, and you can have hundreds of subsets for terminology. So whatever you might require. But I completely agree with Val. The less you manage to have in your company, the more consistent your content is going to be.
Okay, thanks, Philipp. There's another question, and I think that probably also is something you can answer, Philipp. If we use Congree with SDL Tridion Docs, can other departments also work with Congree, also if they have different editors, like Word, for instance?
Yeah, that's actually a very nice thing about Congree. Congree does not 100% depend on the editing environment. So if you have Tridion Docs in one department and in another department, you only have PowerPoint because you're only creating product presentations, or you only have Outlook because you're in consumer communication. Maybe there's a department using other editing environments like the classic Word, everybody knows. Congree can plug into all of those. So Congree supports a lot of editors, and not only existing editing environments. Congree has also web integrations. So we have a browser plugin, we have a web front end, we have many possibilities to integrate Congree into anything, really. So we have a REST API which you can use to do your own integrations into your own environments, which might not be publicly available, but only within your company. And the nice thing about it is Congree will behave the same in all of them. So you will have access to the same sentences, you will have access to the same style guides, and you will get the same feedback in those editing environments, ensuring that you can achieve a high content consistency, a high corporate identity with the help of Congree wherever content is being created. So there's a higher flexibility.
Yeah, thanks, Philipp, for this answer. In the name of SDL, Content Rules and Congree, I'd like to thank you for attending this webinar today, and we hope it was interesting for you. And the webinar recording will be available shortly, and we will be happy to send you a link with a recording. And so all I can say is bye for today. Have a nice day, afternoon or evening. Thanks, Val. Thanks, Chip. Thanks, Philipp. And wherever you are, take care. Thanks.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.